Welcome to The Gabrielle Lara Show, a podcast dedicated to normalizing the messy middle of entrepreneurship. I am your host, Gabrielle Lara, and I invite entrepreneurs from all walks of life onto this podcast to share what they navigated to get from where they were to where they are now. My hopes of this podcast is to help you feel more seen and heard in your entrepreneurial journey as you navigate your own version of the messy middle. I appreciate you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is extra special for me. So I am interviewing a woman who I have looked up to in this online space for a very long time. And that woman is no other than Jenna Kutcher. If you don't know who Jenna Kutcher is, she is a digital marketer, influencer, and a host of the top-rated Goal Digger podcast. The exact podcast that I listened to pretty much every single episode of when I was commuting to work in my 9 to 5, 5 hours a day, and I wanted nothing more than to start my own business. When I tell that story, that is the podcast that I was listening to. Jenna has been a huge reason why I have started my business, and it has been a huge dream of mine to interview her. So I'm so happy that that has come true. We walk through all sorts of things. Jenna just recently wrote a book called How Are You Really? And I have a link to that in the show notes if you want to read it. It is an incredible book. And we talk about what this looks like for Jenna. Typically, she talks a lot about business and marketing, and now she's writing a book on how are you really, right? On asking yourself those tough questions. And I just got my hard copy in the mail. I am so excited to read the hard version. I read the digital version. It's an incredible book, and I'm excited for you guys to tune in to this episode to hear the questions that I asked Jenna, her responses, and it was all around your intuition and being in alignment. So I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this. I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know what you think. Hey, Jenna, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here. And so when I was reading your book, I
Yeah.
remember I was just sitting on my couch and I was like, I feel like Jenna is sitting right down next to me having a glass of wine. And like I was saying, I've been in your community for a while, and a lot of the Jenna that I knew was like business and marketing and all of those things. And as I was reading this, I was like, I feel like this is just a new side of Jenna. And I love this so much, diving into the personal development arena. And so as I was reading it, I was like, I've got to ask her why behind this.
Mm.
What was your why behind writing this book?
It's so crazy, Gabrielle, because I literally, for years, with utter certainty, said I would never do this.
Yes.
Never. I mean, I literally was in like an expensive mastermind, and my question to the guy was like, why would anyone ever write a book? Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I love writing. I have blogged for the last decade. I love writing long Instagram captions. I love writing. So it's really interesting. But it was really funny because 2 years ago, it was in the middle of the pandemic. Things were creeping back open. It was my 10-year anniversary with my husband, Drew. We were living in a town of 1,200 in northern Minnesota. So we were like 2.5 hours away from a Target. Like we were in the middle of nowhere. And I thought it would be sweet to book us massages. And I booked a massage, and it was with this woman named Thea. I'd never met her before, and she was a very intuitive person. And at the massage, she just kind of referenced, like, I'm a very intuitive healer type person. I was like, that sounds
Mhm.
great. Can I get my shoulders rubbed? And after the massage, she said to me, she said, there's something you need to do, and you know what it is, and I
Mhm.
need you to go out and do it. And just that line, I want everyone to like close your eyes and listen to this because this applies to you. There is something in your life you need to do, and you know what it is, and you need to go do it. And the minute she said that, I said, I need to write a book. And
Wow.
it was crazy because it was in a season where we were starting to think about having another child. We had struggled to have our first. So it was just kind of like I felt like I was about to throw myself back into this ring again. And she said, no, no, the book needs to come before the baby.
Mhm.
And it was just this wild thing because as soon as she just said, there's something you need to do, I knew immediately. It was so clear. And literally that day I went home. I have a photo on my phone of me opening up a Google Doc that said, I'm writing a book. I titled the doc, I'm writing a book. And it's wild to me because even as somebody who is so confident, who has done so many things in my life and my career, I needed someone to just give me permission to trust myself again. Like, how wild is that? And so I knew because I've been an entrepreneur for so long and an artist and a creative, I knew that I had to approach it differently than the traditional way. I don't do anything traditional, I don't follow the rules in that way. And so I knew that in order to protect this passion, this idea, this creativity, I had to do it in a way that didn't have a deadline and that had $0 attached to it. Because the minute that timelines and money get involved into any project, it becomes work.
Yeah.
I knew that if I wanted to do it, I wanted to be so passionate about it and I wanted it to just be this like beautiful like experience. So I
Yeah.
just started writing. I didn't have an agent, I didn't have a book deal, I didn't have a publishing date, I didn't have a title. I just started writing. And so this process has been just so beautiful and so aligned. And I've loved every part of it, even the parts that authors hate. I've loved it. But I think it's because I did it in a way that made sense for me.
And I love how you said the word aligned because I
Yes.
use that all the time in my business, right?
Yes.
I'm just like preaching that because it's so important and it's
Changes
so easy to
everything.
get caught up in like that person wrote the book that
Yep.
way. I'm gonna do that because they're a New York Times bestselling author. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
And instead, you said no. I'm gonna turn inward and just do what feels best for me.
Yes.
I want to highlight that for everyone
Yes.
listening.
And I've
How
done that the entire process. So it's like, because I said I would never do this, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, I want it to be aligned every step of the way that I write it, the way that it's edited, everything. I want to feel good about it. And it's crazy because I have never been more energized in my life. I've never worked harder in my life. But I've never been more energized and like energetically like just like flowing than I
mm,
am right now in this moment because of alignment. It changes everything.
yeah, I was just gonna say because you're in alignment,
Yeah.
and it's such a game changer. And so I'm curious too. You said for the longest time, I'm not gonna write a
Yeah.
book. Looking back on that now that you've written the book and it's about to come out, what do you think that was? Do you think that deep down maybe it was fear?
I think it was okay. So here's exactly what I think it was. I think I know what it was. So a touch of fear, but more so this game of time and money. So here's
Mm,
what I mean by this. I never understood why anyone would spend 2 years of their life writing and editing and launching a book and put everything else on the back burner because that's what you have to do. And you don't make a lot of money writing books. I don't care who you are. It's you don't write a book to make money. You write a book to make a difference. And
yeah,
for so much of my life, I was in this trading of like, how can I spend time to earn money? How can I spend money to get back time? And it's been this like back and forth game. And writing a book has to be so much more than about time or money. When you write a book, it is like this divine calling. And I just
mm,
didn't have the call yet. And
yeah,
so I remember like looking back, I would be like, okay, in the amount of time that it took for you to even write one manuscript, I could create a course, launch a course, monetize a course, create, like all these things. I had to get into a stage of life where it was not about either of those things and where the
mm,
mission and the message was strong enough. And so the book is just the method of all of those things. But it is interesting because it I was never afraid of the work or afraid of putting it out there. I was afraid about like the vulnerability piece of it because it's like I have 500 plus episodes of the Gold Digger podcast. I have thousands of
mm,
blog posts, thousands of Instagram posts. I've shared a lot of my life, but inside these pages, I've not shared any of this. My husband is reading it. I finally am letting him read it before it comes out. I'm like, you better read this just in case anyone asks you how it is because you haven't read it yet. And he's like, I feel like I'm getting to know a different version of you.
yeah.
And it's this vulnerable side. And so there was a little bit of fear there, but not much. It was just more like I'm revealing a lot of things about experiences and how I felt and how I've moved through these things. But it was definitely about this like time and money trade. And now I'm just in this place of like mission. It's like the mission work trade, which is so cool.
So beautiful, yeah. Because now it's like it's the impact, right? And you really do open up. It's like seeing a new side of Jenna. That's why I was like, I feel like she's on the couch next to
Yeah.
me, and we're just chatting, right? Like we're just having a girls'
Yes.
night chatting. That is such a good feeling. And so, in the first 30 pages, I think it was page like 24. You mentioned talking about it's so easy to not feel your feelings and really just focus on like let the noise of the outside world kind of take over. And then in this one sentence, I remember I like closed the book and I was like, whoa. And you said, like, how long are you willing to ignore the ping? And it seems like maybe that the massage therapist said something
Yeah.
similar to you there. And it's like, whoa. So I'm so curious to hear, when was a time that like you ignored that ping for too long
Yeah.
and what happened?
Yeah, so in that part of the book, it's talking about how like our body and our lives and our energy and the time and our relationships, like everything is giving us signals. And so
Yeah.
often, especially for entrepreneurs, we are so obsessive, right? Because we're passionate. It's awesome. Like passion is so cool. But we ignore so many things that are trying to speak to us because we're so head down in the work. And, it's like, not even like a 5G network can get these notifications through. It's like when you try to send a text and it comes back like message not received. I feel like we're walking through life not receiving these messages because we're so head down or we're just workhorses. We're never lifting our eyes to like see what's going on. For me, it's a lot of times it's been around health. And that's really interesting because when we went through our season with miscarriages, when I look back at the way that I was working, my body was revolting. And I'm not saying that's the reason why I lost pregnancies, but my cortisol, my stress levels were so high. My adrenals were shot. I was doing these super intense workouts and then crashing. I was eating and like going on this yo yo. Like there's so many things about my lifestyle that were so unsustainable, and it's really interesting, Gabrielle, because like I said, I've never felt more energized in my life, but I'm also taking better care of myself right now than I ever have because my why is so anchored deep of like, I want to get this book far and wide that I need the energy to do that. And it's really interesting because I recently had this silly revelation, and it's probably somebody's probably listening to this and they're going to like face palm and be like, duh. But so when my 3-year-old goes to school during the school year, it's at 8 a.m. And she used to, when Drew would drive her to school, that would be my like time where I'd crack open the laptop and get straight to work. And I started recognizing like this is my most productive window of time to pour into myself. And so I flipped the script, and instead of cracking open the laptop, I was like, okay, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes. I'm going to sit in front of a red light. I'm going to do all,
Yeah.
yoga or stretch or breathe or whatever. I'm going to spend my most productive time like energizing myself. And it changed the way I move through the day. It's like that silly quote where it's like, you put on your oxygen mask before you put on others, but we don't practice it. And so it's really wild to me now because I'm sitting here and I'm like, what if I would have done this 10 years ago? What if I would have moved through entrepreneurship in this way? I probably would have a totally different business. I would have felt different as well, the whole quest of it. But it is really interesting. And so it's like, how many times in our lives do we need an Apple Watch to tell us to breathe? How
Yeah.
many times in our
Yes.
lives do we
Oh,
need to be reminded to stand up and move our body? How many notifications, literal and figurative, are we ignoring in our day as we're so head down in the work and we're so focused on our output that we forget, like, how does my life feel? How do I feel about what I'm about to do today? How do I move through my day? And it's just really interesting because it's like we're missing our lives in this quest of like arriving. And like the point of life is to never arrive. It's like why they call yoga a practice. We're just supposed to keep practicing. We're students of it. And so it's really interesting because I just have such a different perspective now, specifically even today after I've written the book.
and I love that so much because you have the community size, right? To be able to share that
Yeah.
message and say, like, it's not about spinning your wheels so much and going and doing 18-hour work days. It's about the journey,
Yes.
right? And slowing down and receiving and giving yourself the time during your most energetic hour of the day because it's so easy to just continuously keep going.
Mhm.
And so, as I was reading as well, you said this quote where you said, "You are your own miracle
Mhm.
emotion."
Yeah.
And as I was reading that, I was like, I wonder when she realized that she was her own miracle
Mhm.
emotion. What did that look like for
It's
you?
being a mom, and for me, it was really like I like look down at my daughters and I like just look at them and I'm like, you're so freaking perfect. Like I look at them and I'm like, look at your eyelashes, look at your feet. Like I just obsess over every little line and dimple and wrinkle. And it's funny because, I'm a Christian in the sense of, not in the sense of, I'm a Christian. And so often I think as adults, it's like when we sit and nitpick ourselves, our bodies, when we look at our flaws, when we focus on these things, it's almost like we're telling our creator, like, you messed up on me. And I
Right.
imagine as a mom someday my daughter being like, why did you mess up on me? And I see her as the most perfect human ever knit in a womb. And so it's like
Mhm.
when I look at them, then I'm like reminded, like, what I believe for them is same for me. The other night, Drew
Yeah.
was handing Quinn, my youngest, into the shower, and I was going to quick bathe her, and her little booty was all dimpled and cute. I was just like, oh my gosh, look at that. And then I was like, and the same applies for me, and the same applies for me, and the same applies for me. And that line, like, you are a miracle in motion, it's like, I recognize a miracle that, like, we are humans on this earth. Like, having
Yeah.
lost pregnancies, having gone through that, like, desperation of, like, I just want this so bad. And, like, I recognize, like, one, the miracle of life, but then it's like this miracle is us too. It applies to us too. Whatever you believe about God or the universe or however you move through in that sense, like, there are no mistakes made on you. The way that you look at the
Yeah.
people you love and think, gosh, if only you saw how incredible you are, the same is true for you. And so maybe you need to adopt the line, and the same is true for me, and the same is true for me. But that's like what I literally have to do whenever I look at my daughters is, the things I believe about them, the same is true for me.
Oh my gosh, like in the first few pages of the introduction where you said to my girls
Oh.
and the note that you wrote, I was like, my goodness, because I'm one of four girls. And I was just sitting there, I was like, I feel like my mom just like said that
Yes.
to me. It was, and like, what a gift to be able
Oh
to
my
give
gosh.
them as they get older.
It's
And
crazy because so I wrote the book. So I wrote the first version of the manuscript before I was pregnant because my brain, when I'm pregnant, is gone. So I was like, I know I want to get pregnant. I'm hopeful to get pregnant. I got to write before then. So
yeah,
most of the writing process was when I was pregnant with Quinn. That was when the editing was going through. We didn't know if she was a girl or a boy the whole time. And so it was really interesting because I handed in my final manuscript days before she was born, and I couldn't write the acknowledgement because I didn't know if it would be girls or children, or I like there was so much of it. And it was so fascinating when she came out a girl, and I was just like, my goal of like writing the book and like the greater vision that I held to is that, like, someday when my girls are old enough to read, I want them to read this book not about their mom. It's not about me. It's not about how to be more like their mom. It's about how to come home to themselves. And I want it to be this life manual for women and men everywhere of, here's your invitation. Here is your permission slip. Here is somebody reminding you there's something you want to do in your life and you're not doing it. Pick this book off the shelf and come back home. Come back home to yourself. And so it was like this heartbeat of, like, I just picture them someday, feeling like they're off the path, that they took a left turn when they should have gone right, or they're not feeling aligned. And like, that's like the manual I want them to have. And so writing the acknowledgement happened after Quinn was born. And it's wild because someone on my team was like, it's almost like as her heartbeat got stronger inside of you, the book got stronger. And it was like, just this crazy process where now I like look back and I was just stumbled upon videos of me like crazy pregnant writing this book, and I'm like, wow, women are amazing.
they really are. You're out here growing two babies at once.
I literally
Seriously,
joke that
two
Quinn
things.
is a twin because I'm like, the book and the baby, they're pretty much twins.
And you did such a good job too of like relating it to your life, but not in a way of like, here, you have
Yeah.
to be like me. It's just, oh, like we all have these experiences. And at the end of the day, just, tune in to like your gut or source or God or the universe or whatever it is that like you feel at home with. Just come back to that. It's not about this outside
Yeah.
world. It's not about what everyone else is doing, not about what you feel like you should be doing. It's
Yeah.
you. You know the answers and
Yeah.
connecting to that. And I love how that messaging is getting
Yeah.
out now because I think it is so important. And, as entrepreneurs, it's very easy to fall into the race of like, this person did that for, X amount of dollars. Let me go dive in and do it. But at the end of the day, like, we're not all meant to have the
No.
same journey. Somebody's blessings isn't meant to be
Yes.
somebody
There's a line in the
else's.
book that says, like, maybe it didn't work for you because it didn't come from you. And I think we're going
Yeah.
through life. And here's the thing that's so funny is like, even in writing the book, I'm like, I am someone who loves systems. I love sharing things. I love strategies. I love all of that. But even you brought up, personal development. And it's like, we all want to develop, but we've forgotten the personal aspect of that. Like, you can take somebody that's ahead of you and take their systems and strategies. But when you apply your person and your personality and your tendencies and your gifts and your passions and your curiosities, your end result should not look like anyone else's because it didn't come from them. It comes from you. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, because there's so much of my work in helping people find their niche. It's like for everyone listening,
Yeah.
that's it. It's you bringing in
Yes.
you, like your uniqueness, your experiences, your personality, because that's what people buy at
Yeah.
the end of the day. Of course, that's one side of it, but for you to be whole, for you to hold that space for your clients, for you to hold that space for yourself and your family, you have to fill up your
Mhm.
cup and you have to come home to yourself, as Jenna says. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. So, what would your advice be for somebody who is really just kind of realizing this? Like it's time for me
Yeah.
to come home to myself. Like, what is your advice to help them kind of
Yeah.
kickstart that journey?
In the book, I tell this story about sitting with a friend of mine who is probably one of the hardest workers I've ever met. She's obsessively passionate about anything she's doing, and I remember sitting with her and saying, it's like you need to do a couch to 5K, but in reverse. Like, you are running a 5K in your life figuratively every single day. Like, you are running this life of, like, I am just like going and going and going and churning and churning, and my worth is tied up to my output and like all of these things. And I was like, you need to learn how to rest. Like, you literally need to train yourself on how to slow down and get quiet. And so, if somebody is listening to this, chances are they're probably an achiever, right? They're probably someone who is driven, who wants to achieve big things, who is going after big goals. All of those things are so beautiful. But if you don't come back to yourself and even just ask myself, like, how am I really? Like, do I actually like my life, or am I faking it? Am I filled with gratitude, but I'm still unhappy? Am I blaming myself that I'm broken because I should be happy and I'm not? Like, all of these things, you have to start training yourself to rest, because I went through life and entrepreneurship for so long believing I was incapable of rest. I just, operate at a higher level. My brain is just wired differently than the rest. No, I needed to rest, and I needed to learn how to rest. And even to this day, as somebody who rests very often, rest takes work. And a lot of times we're not willing to do that work to get to that place. And so if you are in a place where you just feel this kind of unease, like your foundation isn't steady, like your roots aren't deep enough, my advice is, like, learn how to get quiet with yourself. Start with just a minute. Start with going to the bathroom without bringing your cell phone with. Literally start there. Start with driving in the car
Yep.
without listening to anything, without drowning out yourself, your gut. And I know it feels scary because, as people who are action takers, we know that if the answer is I'm not okay, that we have to do something about it. But let me tell you that if you start making progress, if you enter into that messy middle and really start to inch your way towards that other life, it's going to feel so much better. And so I
Yeah.
would just say, literally put yourself on a training plan. Start with a minute today, then 2 minutes tomorrow. Learn how to get quiet with yourself. Imagine what it would feel like to take a week off, or even a day off, or to log out, to quiet that noise of the whole world, because there's something so beautiful that's being drowned out, and it's your inner knowing, and it's always been there and it's never left you, but we've just stopped listening to it. And so it's like, how do we tune our ears to start listening again? Because a lot of times when we're not happy, or when we don't feel fulfilled, or when we don't feel settled, it's because we're not listening in the first place.
Exactly. And I would imagine too that, somebody listening to this may be like, I try to get quiet or I try to stop working, but then I feel guilty. So what would you tell them if they really tie that guilt of, okay, I'm going to take a nap at 1 p.m. in the middle of the day instead of, be on Instagram kind of hustling away? What would your advice
Rest
be
does
for them
not need to
there?
be earned. Rest is a birthright, and it's a necessity.
Oh,
It's
preach. I
really
love it.
interesting because every single time in my life and business, and I want you to listen to this, this is so important. Every single time in my life or business that I have exploded to new heights, it has always followed a season where I've claimed time as my currency. because when I get back my
Mhm.
time, I get creative again, I get inspired again, I get curious again, I take time to learn something new again, and all of those things compound for the rest of my life. You can keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, but there's a difference between force and flow. And when you enter flow,
Mm.
when things just pour out of you, when the pages poured out of me, or when this podcast pours out of Gabrielle, like it's different. It feels different. The experience is different. It is contagious. And so every single time in my life and business where I've said, I'm drawing a line in the sand, this is my enough point. All I want is time back. That time has earned me so many more dollars, but it's never been about that. It's about like how I'm moving through my life, and my enjoyment has skyrocketed. So you can see a pie chart of the money and all of that kind of stuff. But like, if you could see like a joy chart, like that would be the most inspiring part of this. So I would just say like rest is a requirement. But the funny thing is too, is like when you are well rested, your work changes and your energy shifts. And it is
Yeah,
so palpable that it extends beyond every single thing that you do.
I love
I
that.
know,
A joy
right? Let's start
chart.
a
We should
joy
start
chart. That'd be great.
trademark that, create one of those. So two final questions here as we wrap up. Number one is, what is one thing that you wish you can go back and tell yourself at the start of
Oh,
your business?
honestly, I don't know if I would tell myself anything. I know that's so lame. I would tell myself to
Yeah.
just keep trusting myself, that no one is responsible for giving me a big break, that I will create all of my own big breaks. And I mean that not in the self righteous place, but in a place of protect your best yeses. You know how to push the gas pedal, and the things that have gotten you this far are the things that'll carry you forward.
That's so beautiful. I ask all my podcast guests that, and I love to
Yes.
hear their
And
answers.
then
So
the other
it's
part of
so
me is like, don't tell yourself
beautiful.
anything, because maybe I wouldn't have ended up where I am today. I don't know.
I mean, and that's such a good point too. Like you never know. And so finally, how can people get in touch with you, Jenna?
Yeah.
How can they read this book? The link will be in the show notes, but
Oh,
please
go
tell them
anywhere
everything.
you buy your books, whether it's Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Target, an indie bookstore, a local store. How Are You Really? And it is out June 28th. And you can also go to howareyourreallybook.com. We have some fun bonuses if you purchase. Just as a thank you, there are tons of additional resources woven throughout the pages waiting for you. It is just my greatest work that I've done to date, and a really way to adopt this life philosophy that allows you to live your truth one answer at a time, but also love the life that you're loving. And I'm so excited about it. And you can also find me at Jenna Kutcher. Hang out with me at the Gold Digger podcast. Clearly you're a podcast listener, so I'd love to have you listen in on our show. And you can just find me anywhere. I'm pretty easy to find.
Yes, I have been listening to Jenna's podcast forever, and she's a huge reason of why I started my business. So, highly recommend listening to that and reading the book. And
Oh
Jenna,
my
thank
goodness,
you so
thank
much
you
for
for
joining
having me. It's
me.
been such a treat.
Did you enjoy today's episode? If so, I would be super appreciative if you left a review and a rating and shared this with a friend so that I can continue to bring you value every single week. I'll see you next time.